getting triggered by a partner, especially when it's a partner that is willing to join you in the process of doing the work, a partner that's able to be supportive, even when they don't know how to be supportive, they're making an attempt to be supportive. Yeah. A lot of the time, that's just your partner serving as a mirror so that you can finally heal the things that need to be healed, that weren't safe to heal before.
What's up, YouTube family? Real quick, if you could just like, comment, subscribe, that helps out the show so much. Now, let's get into it.
The SelfHype Podcast.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to SelfHype Podcast. It's your boy Eli Vasquez, brought to you by Chobo Studios. We love him. Maritza Placencia. I get to interview her today, and guess what? She's my first therapist. Oof. If you're wondering, Eli, you were dusty musty in these streets doing God knows what, hollering out of insecurity and all this. Now you go to therapy and you're emotionally regulated. How'd you do it? She was pivotal into getting me there. And I'm so excited that you get to meet her now. Her name is Maritza Placencia. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, founder of Mindful Quest Relationship Counseling in California. Her specialty is working with adult individuals, couples dealing with relationship issues rooted in trauma. So we're going to dive into couples therapy. We're going to dive into your own trauma. We're going to dive into how to get your man into some therapy and when to call it quits. Let's jump in. Hi. How's it going, Maritza? Hello. I like, this is like a big old reunion jamboree right here because I was watching our BuzzFeed video that was, I think, well, it says 5 years ago, but I feel like it was even longer than that. I don't even know, but in case, I did the intro, but people need to know, you were my first therapist. You were my first on camera in a BuzzFeed video, and you blew my mind in the most frightening, most impactful, positive way possible. But either way, I want to dive into that. I want to dive into a lot of things with you. But Maritza, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to see you again. And yeah, it feels like a really long time since we did that.
Yeah.
That sort of BuzzFeed. Yeah.
It was wild. Yeah. So for the people listening, I worked at BuzzFeed and I was part of the Latino brand called Better Like. And I thought, I was like, oh, I'm the Latino that's like dives into his identity and normalizes personal wellness and mental health and all these other things. And I figured it was just like, well, how do we challenge our culture and identity in ways that we haven't before? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna grab all the guys. I'm gonna do therapy. And obviously, I think it was an excuse for me to, like, this is the only way I was gonna do it because I was too afraid to do it on my own. So I used this as an excuse for work. So we teamed up with Latinx Therapy with Adriana, who was on a couple episodes ago. And we got to sit down and chat and but talked with me through that experience of being on camera, like chatting with these men that have never done it before. Like, how was that experience for you?
Well, it was definitely a first for me. I've never done therapy on camera. That was nerve-wracking.
Was it really? You seem so cool, calm, and collected. I think we were the ones sweating, freaking out.
Apparently, I'm really good at acting.
Apparently, I was impressed. I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Yeah,
I think I really learned a lot from sitting with all three of you, and I feel like from there, what really stood out was what I had already perceived in my work, which was how difficult it is for men to really open up, to really trust the process. And I just remember that in itself was really helpful for me as a therapist because we got to talk about after what experience was like. And that was just such a pivotal time for me in my clinical work because it really helped me, I think, take things to another level with the men that I was working with at the time.
Really? Oh my God, I'm so glad this benefited you. In that way, that it was able to help others. That's freaking dope. Oh my goodness. I thought I'm like these idiots don't know what the hell they're doing. No, I'm kidding. It is interesting. It's so beautiful to talk to you because it was like on camera. It was weird because it hit on. I think I already do this when I'm nervous or I think I'll say this. It was the first sign of knowing that I have signs in different moments of emotional states. And I couldn't even verbalize that sentence when we first met. So it's really cool that I can even share that with you right now of just, I'll never forget we were doing our session and I was like, cracking jokes, and I was like, like talking about you, and I was like, and you were like, why are you running away from me? And I was like, oh my God, she could read right through me. I'm like, this was like a wall that she just like saw through and just like, let's address this. And it was so impactful and it was so new. Um, and I think I like felt bad after. I felt like I like did it wrong. I was like, I'm so sorry that I
Oh,
therapy
you
that.
know, I still remember whenever I thought about or I've been reminded about that experience, and
Yeah.
right now you're talking about it, I still remember feeling the feeling I had with when I was working with you
Yeah.
specifically. Like when you go to the fair and there's like a fun house and you're trying to like find your way out? That's exactly the experience that I had. I felt like I kept running into mirrors
Oh,
because
really?
yeah, because I was like, "Oh, he's gonna, like, totally go along with this," and I would ask you a question, and it was like, boom, like, like, bumped into a mirror, another mi and I was like, "What the heck?" Like, "You are really getting away from me." That's
Wow, that's wild. So it's so cool to dive into the inner workings of this. What's up, y'all? I know you guys are enjoying the show, but real quick, I just want to talk about the Patreon. Patreon, you get early access to episodes, bonus content, and you could even ask a question that gets on the show. It's patreon.com/selfhype. Now, let's get back to it.
and it was like, boom, like, like, bumped into a mirror, another mi and I was like, "What the heck?" Like, "You are really getting away from me."
Wow, that's wild. So it's so cool to dive into the inner workings of this.
Yeah.
Cause cause I thought I was gonna be the most emotionally open one because I'm doing personal wellness and talking about like self-care and all these other things. And because we had Adriana off camera and Maya too helped produce it, and they even said, I'm like, I felt like you had like Eli, you had moments where you were like really close to opening up, but then you retreat back.
Yeah.
And I had no idea it was this difficult. And I will say even now, I like notice like I'm able to address it and be self-aware of it, but it's such a it's something I didn't even realize at the time, which was so wild. But it's cool to hear that you're no, I felt you were running around in this like maze and whatnot. I was like, I swear I'm just trying to stay here, but I can't. My nervous system's freaking out. It's like this. But but either way, it's in case you guys don't know, I got to work with Maritza even after we got to do a session, which was awesome. And that was pivotal for me in terms of my healing and my growth because I felt like therapy was the last frontier that I was avoiding. I was doing everything else but that because I knew it was going to force me to like have to verbalize and speak to another human being about the things that are bringing me shame, the things that are weighing me down. Um, and you did such a phenomenal job helping me navigate through that where it was extremely emotional. I get emotional even thinking about that session that we had where I was able to finally leave myself alone because I always felt therapy was, oh, you're going to come in, you're going to be like, I'm going to find this one, you built this house of cards, I'm going to pull this one card out from the bottom, it's all going to fall and crash. But I did not even realize the potential of having a therapy session where I'm like, oh my God, I'm finally taking off this weight off my shoulders I've been holding for so long. So I want to thank you for that. And all those things. So just, and I call Maritza my Yoda, my mental therapy Yoda, just so everyone is aware and knows. But with that said, I think like there's a lot of things I want to dive into, but I think what's beautiful is I get to interview you and ask you questions, which is really fun. So I think I want to hear about like, we got to do a bit of an intro of you and the work that you do, but I'm curious, like, when was this moment that you realized you wanted to help people in this way? Like, what was that aha like for you?
Hmm. Well, it's a long story on how I got to the decision of wanting to become a therapist, but I will tell you that I started therapy when I was 19,
Wow.
and when I saw what that meant for me, um, and then as time went on, I saw the things that it was doing for me, um, I decided, "Okay, this is something that I might wanna do." Because I started off wanting to be in the criminal justice system, and I used to work
Mm,
at the courthouse, helping people that were dealing with domestic violence. I was specifically specializing in domestic violence, being as a victim advocate,
yeah.
and seeing the way that people were struggling, seeing that, it was really there was a missing component. If people only had the support, if people only were able to understand that the history that they had lived through growing up was repeating itself in some cases, in most cases, right? So I started seeing all of this, and at some point I decided, okay, I think this is what I want to do,
Yeah.
and that's when I decided to go for grad school, and the rest is history. It just kind of took me down this path where at some point I had to decide, do I want to work with kids? Do I want to work with adults? And I remember after working with kids for a while and realizing that the parents had such an impact on what the kids were experiencing, I was like, I think I need to specialize with adults, and not necessarily adults that have kids only, but adults that could potentially one day become parents.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
That is I love your not strategy, but you saw what the impact was on the children, and then like the struggles of parents, and then like you saw something in terms of like, okay, how do we break some chains here before it
Yeah.
affects these children? Like
Yeah.
the parents to be, which I think is very beautiful and intentional in terms of that. Like I'm curious. There's one thing you started so young in this therapy journey, which is beautiful. And I'm curious of being on the other side. Like, how has this like shaped you and your life experience? Like, kind of diving into this line of work. So I can only imagine like you digesting all this in a
Mm.
profession. It could be a
Well,
lot.
I started at 19, not because I chose to all of a sudden go and do therapy, but
You did
I
one yoga class and you're like, yeah, I'm on this now. You
yeah,
do that one trip and you're like, yeah, I love this. It's like that's what it is.
no, I had experienced some pretty traumatic stuff towards the end of high school. I
Mm.
had lost my best friend in a car accident. And so uh, just like a whole collection of experiences that ended up resulting in me experiencing a lot of difficulty my first year in college, and my mentor sitting down with me and saying, I think you need to go to therapy.
Wow.
Well, not knowing at the time that I actually was dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow.
So that is kind of how I was introduced into therapy. Um, and the way that it's impacted me, I met my husband right around that same time. We started dating. And I remember at some point when we were already like married, my husband saying, you realize that if therapy was not part of our lives, we probably wouldn't be a thing.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. Because we learned to manage the things that were coming up for us as a couple through therapy
Wow.
before I was even a therapist. So yeah,
Okay.
my husband also kind of jumped in, on the same boat, and he started therapy very early in life, very early in a relationship, and yeah, we still do therapy till this day.
That's okay. So you said you started therapy when you were 19.
Yeah,
Um, so you guys were dating when you were 19. You guys were teenagers dating,
yeah.
and he soon after followed suit in terms of going to therapy as well. So, like, your guys' brains are still sponges at that point, like early 20s and whatnot. So, like, diving into this experience individually, but while together, that's phenomenal. And I think you're hitting on something that is really important for everyone to hear is that just because you do therapy, it could be years later, you guys are still doing it. It's not like, oh, we do it, he does it, I do it, and then we do a couple sessions and we're fixed. Yay. It's like this is a lifelong experience of shifts, changes, growth that is necessary kind of for both parties, in that. So that's really cool. That's beautiful that you guys have that. I gotta ask this because I already know people are thinking, I'm like, there's a lot of ladies on this podcast. We talk about love, dating, relationships, all that, but also self-hype and healing. They're probably healing, well, Eli's a former fuckboy and he went to therapy. She got her man to go to therapy when he was a teenager. It's like, how do I get my man to go to therapy?
Mm.
Like, that is the hard question of, well, I'm doing this work. I'm listening to Eli's podcast. I'm getting to know Maritza and on all her amazing services and how much value she gives. But my partner, I want him to do this. Maybe he's not as receptive. So, like, is that even a conversation? Does this person need to find that on their own? Like, how do you even navigate that?
So this comes up a lot And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that when your partner is not ready for it, if you've brought it up and your partner's like, that's not for me, they're not ready to even have the conversation, you leave it alone. You
Wow.
don't. You don't push that, because what can happen is if you're pushing it on someone, they can develop this, resistance that later on is not gonna go away if things changed, and they might have become open because they now have this bad experience where they're feeling like they're being asked or being forced to do something that they're not ready to do.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is, if you feel that your partner should be in therapy with you, you start, because we can get started with you. I specifically use what's known as emotionally focused therapy.
Mm.
So when someone is trying to work with their partner who's not willing to be in therapy, we focus on everything and anything that's going to help, not to manipulate the partner, because I don't give that impression, but to change the dynamic so
Mhm.
that the other partner can soften up and be more invested in the relationship. And oftentimes that results in that partner wanting to join therapy.
Interesting. Okay. So I know a lot of people probably heard that and they're like grinding their teeth right now. It's just like, Maritza, you don't understand that this man, that, I'm like, but you follow suit first. You show that the water's not scary and the water's just fine and you're doing a backstroke. And if anything, do you see positive progression in my partner? Maybe I could dip my toe in and see, okay, this is something that, I could do. But that's
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 exactly
that's phenomenal. Okay.
that's how it works. And I will say this, on August 7th, it's my 20th anniversary
Oh
of
my gosh.
dating. So it works.
Wait, I'm sorry. 20th anniversary of you
My
two.
my wedding anniversary with my husband, yeah.
Wow! Congratulations. Love it, love it, love it. 20. So I'm like, y'all, I'm telling you, I know, just keep hanging in there, do some backstrokes, do that work on yourself, see that progression, and let them follow suit. Well, that's phenomenal. And that's great that he's been, consistent with himself and you guys have been able to, work on that. What are like, I'm curious of like, what are like some common misconceptions of like couples counseling, like couples therapy? Like you hit on something that was really important of like, well, I want to go to therapy. He needs to go to therapy. Like we both need to be on this thing. We both need to be on the same page. Or which very much it's okay if there's two different. Well, is there any other like misconceptions you see when it comes to around the world of like couples therapy, couples counseling, things like that?
I think that often people have the expectation that they're gonna go to couples counseling and that they're just gonna get tools.
Yeah.
That's really helpful, but really what I think helps the most is to actually have.
What's up, y'all? I know you guys are enjoying the show, but real quick, I just want to talk about the Patreon. Patreon, you get early access to episodes, bonus content, and you could even ask a question that gets on the show. It's patreon.com/selfhype. Now, let's get back to it.
Really, what I think helps the most is to learn how to actually have the conversations that you need to have with your partner.
Mm.
And that's something that, um, you need to make sure that whoever you're going to end up working with is able to actually teach you, guide you through that process. Because a lot of people think that the content, so like, I'm going to go and tell the therapist what happened, what you did. And then it turns into this game of like,
Mm.
I'm going and telling on you, you're going and telling on me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then that kind of takes away the value of the work that's being done. And so what I tell people when I'm working with couples is, we're not here to focus on the content, we're here to focus on the process.
Mm-hmm.
So in real time, in therapy, I want to know your partner's talking about how you didn't take out the trash, one example.
Yeah.
Or if they're dating, your partner's talking about how you opted to go hang out with your friends instead of hanging out with, their friends when you had already planned to do so.
Right.
Right? You change the plans last minute. So it's not, we don't focus on why didn't you? We don't focus on that. We focus on, all right now, what's happening? Like what's coming up for you? What's the story you're telling yourself? We focus on like, what are you feeling? What emotions are coming up? Where in your body are you feeling it? So every question that follows, it's to bring the person more into the internal experience.
Mm,
The
okay.
person, so that A, they become more aware, B, their partner becomes more aware of what's really going on internally. And that's the process that we're talking, right? Because you
Okay.
get to know each other on a different level. You're not getting caught up with the details of what happened and what didn't happen.
Yeah, that's I think that's super key. I've only done couples therapy once. I did say I want to like start normalizing that moving forward, and it is still something I want to do. But you're right; it's really hard sometimes to like, especially when they're just frustrating you, and like I'm like I can't wait to go to therapy, and they just bring this up. Or like I can't lie, like there was moments where they brought some stuff up that I was like not okay, and I'm just like just kind of sit in the back and I'm like, fucking, yeah, you fucking tell her, dude. But you get it. It's non-productive. Like it's us. We're a team here. She's a whole other human being and whatnot. But it's important to flag that in terms of that process because like things are going to come up. Like issues are going to arise no matter what. Like it's that efficiency, I guess, in terms of that processing of how to resolve. And I can't help but feel like a lot of times like, oh, you didn't take out the trash. Is it really about the trash? Like, why are we bringing this up in couples therapy to the point of like, it's like, you don't understand. But she
Yeah.
doesn't do anything. And then that brings you back to like 5 years ago and she can't get over whatever the hell it may be. But I want to flag this before we dive in deeper though.
Yeah.
20-year anniversary, phenomenal. Started diving in therapy at a really young age. So Maritza, your relationship must be like perfect, right? Like there's no issues, there's no problems, no arguments, there's like everything. It's like pristine and like squeaky
No,
clean, no issues, right? Right?
not perfect at all. Far from it.
That's amazing. So that's great to hear because I feel like a lot of people may hear that and be like, well, I'm screwed. I'm 32. I should have found a man when I was 19 that was down to go to therapy. And now, because she's now happy and there's no issues because she's a therapist and he goes to therapy and everything's fixed in the world and everything's great. Like, but it's not. You're in a real relationship with another human being, right?
It takes so much commitment and hard work. And it was something I started saying pretty recently when people started asking me, because people in my life are aware that, oh, you're coming up on your 20th anniversary. They started asking like, what do you think has worked? People do walk around with this
Yeah.
impression that they're like this perfect couple.
Right.
Like, no, I've told people I've questioned my marriage.
Yeah.
I've questioned I've questioned myself as a therapist working with couples because things weren't good as in my marriage.
Wow.
I've there was a time when my husband kept saying, "We need to go to couples therapy." Speaking of partners that don't want to go. And I
Yeah.
was, no, I don't want to go.
Wow.
So, and I was the one resisting going to couples therapy because
Yeah.
I didn't feel ready for it at the time. Right. And so, the other thing is I started telling people that even though it's a 20-year marriage, I feel like I've been in multiple relationships within this one relationship
Wow.
because there's been times where when our relationship had to die, the old version had to die so that we could start over again.
Wow.
Right. And it's inevitable because as you're growing as an individual, you realize what used to work before it no longer works.
Yeah.
So, my relationship is far from perfect.
You hit on something that was really interesting. It was like this has to die. Like this this dynamic has to end. Like cuz like there's personal shifts that we all have, like growth and better understanding and like realizing like I know you focus on trauma as well of like I'm finally addressing this thing or whatever internal that I'm like growing into or feeling more confident to grow into that could shift the relationship. And I love that you are normalizing an idea that I think a lot of people are afraid of is the end of something or end of identity or even communication in a way that these things need to change out of the fear of, say, may losing that person or losing the relationship, which I think a lot of people just like swallow it just for the sake of keeping this here, even though it's not even digestible. So you hit on a lot of things. So everyone hears 20 years. She was a therapist. She was like, fuck no, I ain't going to no couples therapy. You've been great, but he was patient with her as well. So that's really great that you guys have that dynamic of, even through chaos, there is still you could still see him through the thick of it, which is great to hear. I guess I'm curious too of like what is like some of the work that these couples should do, say, outside of the sessions? Because I feel like the session itself could be the only area where they're communicating. They're only the area where they're doing, like, maybe they'll hold it all and then, okay, I'm gonna unleash all this like in the session. But like, where do you think that lies, like, in terms of their responsibility outside of it?
It's hard to pinpoint just one thing,
Yeah.
or even just to say, oh, like this is what applies to all couples.
Right.
I'm just thinking about some of the things that come up with some of the couples that I work with that I'll encourage them to do outside of therapy, which is practicing, I call it radical honesty,
Mm.
right? You might make a mess by being honest, but it's necessary because you're basically challenging the level of intimacy where you're at so that it can expand. And because you have therapy, like if you're already in therapy, you have that safety net to catch you.
Right. Oh,
So you can, so I sometimes tell couples that are like, that's too scary. Because they'll come and then they'll just like towards the end of the session, they'll drop like a, you know, a bomb of, truth, of
yeah.
honesty. They're like, we're dipping out and it's like, and we can't talk about it until that next session. And I'll say to them, you can't do that. You need to
Yeah.
do it prior to so that when you come here, you get to talk about it.
Right.
So, it's like you have therapy. I'm here to hold you, to hold the space for you, but I need you to also do some of that work out there because here you're only getting to practice. Out there, you need to actually apply what you're learning and what you're practicing within therapy. But
Yeah.
also, I will say that sometimes couples need to work on getting there first,
Mhm.
right? So on building the safety within the relationship to actually practice honesty, to actually expand on their level of intimacy.
Right. That's
Mhm.
that's that the whole of therapy is your safety net. Like, that is huge. I never thought about it that way. It's to step out in a way that you're being more vulnerable than ever, that you are sharing things and expressing things that could rock the boat, if not a lot, but it's necessary to finally do the work, and that may lead to the death of that current relationship, if anything. But then you reborn in a new one. But I love that like it should provide a sense of relief that we have a space where we could learn to come together, even after the aftermath. If it does come from a space of truth that is very much necessary to share. I never forgot about that. Of you, because you hit on this on the session that we had. And to this day, I bring this up with people that I talk to, that I work with, that personally with me too, of that honesty. Like I'll never forget we with our session, you verbalized just first off, I loved how open you are and how you talk about like your own instances and you make it feel like, I'm a real human being. This is how I navigated it. This is some way things you could do. It really made me feel like connected to you in a really meaningful way. But you hit on the fact that there's some radical honesty that's there. And I remember sitting with that radical honesty. I'm like, dude, if I'm radically honest with like my girlfriends, they would throw a goddamn like shoe at me. Like they would break my freaking, they would slash my tires and leave if I say like, "Hey, this woman is attractive," or I keep finding myself with a lingering eye, or I keep, whatever that may be. A lot of people be like, "Screw you, dude." It's like that radical honesty could be very like hitting on the self-esteem in a deep way where it's like, why am I even in this relationship then? The fact that's even a possibility, like, blows my mind. So
Yeah.
that radical honesty is real. And I love that if you have this therapy tool, that's somewhere where guys could go to kind of really reconnect, even if it leads to that.
Yeah. Well, with the way the examples you just gave, I think that if your partner's not able to really receive that level of honesty, then maybe you guys are not at the same level of readiness to build the kind of intimacy that you guys are looking for.
Yeah.
Right? And that in itself is one reason why you want to practice radical honesty, because if you're at a place where you're actually able to and wanting to, and you realize your partner's not able to receive it, then it's like, okay, what are we going to do here? Are you willing to put in the work so that we can catch up to each other
Yeah.
and willing to put in the work, or is this a big deal enough for us to reconsider whether or not this is going to work?
Yeah. Because I mean, I get the questions all the time of like, well, how do I make them do this? Or how do I have them do this? Or how do you like, it's like, you can't really force anyone to do anything, but there does have to be a level of, I realize that I made the choice to be in a relationship. There's a certain responsibilities that come with it. But if you're in your deep seated truth that this is all it's ever going to be, and I don't want it to be anymore, and I want it, and I want this, and the other person wants this in an entirely different way, that's where it's like, at a certain point where we're a team here, we're a support system here, we're creating culture here. If we don't want to communicate, if we don't want to come together, if we don't want to grow in any way, then what the hell are we doing then? Like that. But again, it's the fear. I don't want to lose the person. I don't want to lose them. So let me just stay. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Marita. I'm really curious. So say someone's listening and they're just like, should we do this? Like, I don't know if we should or not. Like, I'm like a little, maybe like even therapy in general. Like, what are some like questions you think like someone should ask? Like, what are some things that they should, if you feel like this is the right step, what questions they should ask themselves, or like what questions would you bring up to them to kind of maybe checklist to say this is a necessary action to take, either in like couples counseling or like even solo counseling?
Just in general, thinking about, and even just based on what we were just talking about, it's like, if you're questioning, should I be pursuing therapy because of my relationship? Or maybe lack of relationship. Maybe I'm having trouble finding a partner
Uh,
that feels like a good fit. I think that the question should be, am I feeling, whether I'm in a relationship or whenever I do, get to date someone, am I feeling connected with that person?
mhm.
Am I feeling like I'm able to connect, or is it really difficult for me?
Yeah.
Because that's really telling about whether or not there might be stuff there for you to look at, to go deeper with, to explore, to see like what it is that you need to do in order to heal, remove those barriers.
Yeah.
Because even just going back to your example of radical honesty, if someone is in a relationship and they're all of a sudden, like kind of like looking outside of the relationship, feeling attracted. Sure, we're all human. We all have eyes. There's pretty people all around us,
Yeah.
right? And also there's like vibes that people give off that are attractive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I'm doing that may actually be me, a way that I use to run away from intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Right.
it may be, if that's something that happens to me and I'm not able to talk about it with my partner, or maybe I know that's a pattern and I don't have a partner, there you go. There's your answer of like, all right, maybe this is something I want to go and explore more,
Yeah.
right? There's a root cause for why it is that you're running away from intimacy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's, I think, yeah, personally with me, and I love that you said that, it was like, I got to live enough where I saw my habits, and those habits weren't serving me. If anything, they were like a distraction, or I was like not trying to, I was running away from myself through these habits. But I had a certain level of data collection that was like, this is stopping me from, like, this doesn't feel good. And I know this is non sustainable in terms of whatever the relationship, in terms of myself. And I need something. I need like some sort of resource to help me even navigate that. I mean, so I like that you hit on the fact that, it's like, is this something that's necessary? Is this something that I need? Um, and to kind of do that deep dive, because that was like, because I was the first one. I'm the first one to go to therapy, I think, in my family. First one to go to therapy in general, like first man in my family probably ever to ever do anything like that. Plus growing up Latino is like not normal whatsoever. Like, you tell anyone you're doing therapy, they think you're like going to the loony bin or something, like, oh, you're crazy, obviously, or you ask your parents, what did I do wrong? Oh my God, did I break you or something? And I'm like, oh God, now it's about you. Now it's your therapy session. You're talking to me. But no, it's really cool to hear that. It's like, it's necessary and beautiful to kind of check in with yourself and to see what relationships you're in, what actions you're taking, and is that getting in the way of something that you would want, or that is ideal or really true to you. And that's where you popped up in my life and really helped me to do that. And I carry on that radical honesty Now more than ever. Especially with love and dating and everything else. Because I love that you said that fear of intimacy. That's definitely something like definitely back then was something that I did was like, well, I'll just jump ship. And I won't ever really like invest in this because I'll keep jumping ship because out of just fear. So that's something that's definitely worth bringing up. So I appreciate you helping me navigate that and normalizing this radical honesty. And all these ladies are saying, yes, more radical, honest men. Yes, please, let's normalize this to the masses. Just tell me if you just want to hook up with me or you actually want a relationship, please. So that's fantastic. Thank you for bringing that up. You also focus on like trauma, like working with people going through trauma. And that is interesting in terms of like, some people process this very differently. Like they could feel like this is something they need to deal with when it happens, or they suppress it for so long and then it may come out even later and then what have you. I'm curious is like, that could be such like an emotional, like heavy thing that you may not want to address. I'm curious, like, how do you work with people and kind of help them? I'm bringing this back to relationships as well, because this is really hitting on what we're talking about, but how do you like help them like kind of hold their hand through those initial first steps of like opening up and coming into therapy? Like maybe they went to therapy, it's a huge one, but like, how do you kind of help them kind of unravel that in a way that is not destructive or sustainable, if that makes sense? Like, what are those first initial steps?
So first, I wanna say this about, because you mentioned how it's different for everybody.
Yeah. What's up, y'all? I know you guys are enjoying the show, but real quick, I just want to talk about the Patreon. Patreon, you get early access to episodes, bonus content, and you could even ask a question that gets on the show. It's patreon.com/selfhype. Now, let's get back to it.
When we experience a traumatic event, if we receive or seek out intervention within the first 6 months, this is based on, what I know from my training and how our nervous system works.
Yeah.
For 6 months, if it gets addressed, it doesn't necessarily get integrated into our nervous system as, we're going to call it big T trauma. So it's not
Okay.
a big deal, right? Why? Because we're processing very early on.
Yeah.
And it may still affect us down the road. It may still be something that comes up and that we still need to work on a little bit more as time goes on. But when we run away from dealing with something traumatic and 6 months go by, a year goes by, and a lot of us, what we do is something traumatic can really take a toll on us physically. We may lose sleep. We may not feel like eating. We may just want to, or maybe we just want to sleep.
Yeah.
We just want to isolate, right? And so all of that gets in the way of us addressing, processing, and really kind of getting it out of our system. I often use the example of, I have a little dog. So I always use him as an example of like every time Socrates shakes it off, right? He's holding all this tension and he just like shakes it off. Like he's not holding that tension and carrying it with him the rest of the day.
Yeah.
He's shaking it off. He's getting it out of his nervous system. And we need to do that. And when we don't do that, it's like one thing happens and I'm carrying that. And then something else happens and now I'm carrying that. And so it's an accumulation. So then that's where it can get very, very scary to actually go to therapy to address. And it starts creeping in by affecting us in the relationship,
Yeah.
right? I get triggered because of something my partner said. I may be irritable because without realizing that I'm feeling depressed because of what happened.
Right.
So it manifests in different ways. Now, how do I help people navigate through that? If they come to individual therapy, the almost, guaranteed route that we're going to take is we're going to do some EMDR.
Got it.
Which for those that don't know, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy.
Yeah.
It's my favorite way to work with the nervous system. It's one of the most effective forms of therapy to address trauma. And I've been using it. I always tell people I went and did EMDR for myself first in 2010,
Wow.
then trained in it in 2013, and I've been using it since.
Wow.
And I've seen the changes it's brought for my clients. And it's taken people from having nightmares, from having panic attacks, to not having nightmares, to not having panic attacks, which having those can cause a lot of relationship issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
100%. It's exciting because I'm starting this new frontier of EMDR, like therapy. Like I actually had the couples therapist and my therapist, because she doesn't do it, say like, you should probably do EMDR. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like what is it? Our couples therapist was she was like worked in like Afghanistan and worked with like, she's like, oh, I worked with like a lot of ex-military that did EMDR. Like, you should probably do it too. And I'm like, I'm like, goes back to me like, I really gotta, some things I gotta work on. Like, obviously I could regulate that. I'm not a man, I'm not broken. I'm just going through my process, yada, yada. But it's like, oh, okay, this is the new frontier. And I will say, partner at the time probably heard that. And, yeah, you do. It's like, yeah, you need to do some EMDR. Goddamn, you need some military grade trade. No, I'm kidding. But it's an exciting frontier. I have yet to like actually dive into it. I'm starting sessions soon, but it seems like it's very impactful in terms of what you're saying in terms of that nervous system and regulating that properly. Like, I guess for the people that are listening, like, what would be like, I guess, a general like spark notes of like, what does that look like? Like, if someone's like, EMDR sounds cool, but that sounds frightening, and also I don't know if I want to do, like, kind of demystify kind of, I guess, the fears of what that is.
It's one of the things that I find comfort in, and that I think a lot of people that end up saying yes to it also do, is it's very structured.
Uh-huh.
There's protocols that the therapist follows. We are trained to not take people into a place that they're not ready for.
Got it.
So one of the things that I highlight for people that are starting for the first time is that my focus is on making sure you have the internal resources before we even dive into some of the scary stuff.
Got it. Okay.
And then we identify what the targets are through this whole process using a protocol, and then we map out each target. So it's like you're kind of taking a puzzle and taking one piece at a time, so that it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Okay. Got it. It could sound like, oh, you're gonna hypnotize me and like give me like
No.
electric shock therapy or something. I gotta just like, I'll wake up anew, yay! But it's a scary process of having to go through that. Okay, great. I love that. The taking the pieces off, taking it step by step. That's fantastic. But you did hit on the fact of like, this could affect relationships. And I think if someone is diving into therapy or going through this process or rediscovering these certain things, I guess, how could one let their partner in on this process? Or what are some communication or conversations that could happen to help to make that support system, a support system, but also sustainable for the partner as well?
Well, I will add that I do also offer EMDR for couples.
Oh, fantastic.
So some therapists, I think, some years back, it started becoming a thing because they started doing research about the effectiveness,
Mhm.
the clinical effectiveness of EMDR within the setting of couples work.
Yeah.
It's actually really a really big deal. It can
Wow.
be it allows the partner that's not going through the process to witness the process and really kind of understand like, oh, like this is like rough,
Yeah.
right? The stuff that may come up. Um, but it also allows so that the partner that's going through the process can start experiencing some of the support from their partner, so that it also creates this opportunity for intimacy building, for closeness.
Yeah.
They don't have to explain, right? So ideally, I would say if your partner is able to join you and your therapist is someone that offers this within the context of couples, by all means, like that's the ideal route. But if it's not, if you're doing it, individually, what I tell people is I offer the opportunity for people to bring in their partner just for a one-time session,
Okay.
so that so I can explain to them what EMDR is, and I can answer any questions, so that their partner can, get to learn a little bit more about the work that we're doing,
Right.
whatever my client is, ready to share. But also sometimes I get really valuable input from the partners, stuff that my client didn't think to share because for whatever reason, they didn't think it was important. And the partner comes in that session and says, oh, well, are you guys going to be also be working on this thing that comes up often? Right. And then that's
Yeah.
like, oh, wow, I've never heard of that. Right. So then that becomes a thing. So sometimes, if it's a one-time thing that the partner can come in for, or sometimes a periodic thing that the partner can join, as a guest in the sessions, that's also a really beautiful way of including the partner to be a support in the process.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic. That's a resource that's there, and even having the option to bring them in. I mean, because again, they're such a pivotal part of your life, especially if you want this relationship, to work. The big thing I love is that we are normalizing that both people have stuff to work on, and it's okay. Because I feel like with dating, like, and all that, I'm on like TikTok making content and stuff. It's really easy to have your standards so high that you forget that you're trying to find a human being to like bring in. And that human being is going to be met with certain dynamics and things that they're working on. But also you yourself are a human being that you have to ask yourself, why is this wall so high? Do I even trust myself? Is this wall high because I don't want anyone to go? It's like these are necessary conversation points that I think that's where the work is. Because it's beautiful that you were open about your relationship, but also there's so many people that work in this space, like what the Brene Browns of the world or what have you, and they share like the hardest thing I've ever done was like maintain and stay in this relationships, so it is difficult. Even Michelle Obama saying like, I didn't like his ass for like a decade, but we're good now, and it just takes that work. But I think what I'm curious about is like when that nervous system is like triggered, and like attachment style is a popular one, right? Like she's anxious, I'm avoidant, and that could mean a dynamic, maybe in the relationship or even outside of it. But like, I guess in a way, like what are some things that maybe a couples can do when the nervous system is shot? Like we're in the car after having some argument at a cheesecake factory, and that nervous system is back. And maybe there's a history of this nervous system going, out of whack. I guess what are some strategies that you like would give couples in the heat of it to kind of get back to center to be productive and reconnect?
First of all, getting to know what your cycle looks like. So
Okay.
when I become triggered, what normally happens? What do I normally do? What are my go-to behaviors? Right? Because after some time of us observing ourselves and experiencing ourselves, we get to know there's certain things that I do,
Yeah.
right? Like I can tell you my thing used to be, and this is something I've worked on for many years. My thing used to be,
What's up, y'all? I know you guys are enjoying the show, but real quick, I just want to talk about the Patreon. Patreon, you get early access to episodes, bonus content, and you could even ask a question that gets on the show. It's patreon.com/selfhype. Now, let's get back to it.
I can tell you my thing used to be, and this is something I've worked on for many years. My thing used to be, I go and I lock myself in the room. I want nothing to do with anybody, right? It's leave me alone. Don't talk to me. If you even check in on me by knocking on the door to see if I'm ready to talk, it's like, like
Oh my gosh.
it triggered me, right? So get to know, create awareness around how you experience the cycle,
Right.
some of your triggers, so that if you're able to catch that as it's coming, as it's about to take off, you're able to disrupt the cycle.
Right. Okay.
That's one tip. The other is if that, and I tell people, be really patient, because this takes a lot of work for you to create this awareness and for you to actually be at a point where you can disrupt it. So I always tell people, if it happens, you're both triggered, you know that you withdraw, you know that you tend to get anxious and you pursue, acknowledge that. Acknowledge that to each other. Right now, I'm feeling like I need to withdraw. Right now, I'm feeling like anxious and I need to pursue you. And acknowledge that and sit with the discomfort. If you need to stay in the same room to get through it together, do so. If one of you needs to exit, make sure that you let your partner know, I'll be back. Don't come looking for me. I'll be back. Right?
Yeah.
Actually follow through. Because even in that process, there's trust that can be broken if you don't come back.
Mm-hmm.
It can feel like I was just abandoned by my partner, or my partner said that they were going to do this and they left and they never came back. Now I feel betrayed.
Right.
So it's really about creating more awareness about what it looks like and starting off with that. Just start off with awareness. What does it look like in that moment? If once you get through it in that moment, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
What was I thinking about myself? What was I thinking about my partner? What was I thinking about the relationship? Right? Getting familiar with, what's the story that comes up every time that the triggers happen? Getting familiar with, okay, what emotions come up? Do I feel scared? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel resentful? Do I feel kind of like taking the temperature of where am I
Right.
in those moments? Where do I normally feel it in my body? Right? Because that's a big, big deal. When we start recognizing where we feel these emotions in our body, sometimes we start feeling it in our body before it gets up to the head, before it becomes a conscious thing.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one of the ways that we can learn to disrupt it over time is by checking in with our body. If you're not yet seeing a therapist, or if you're just not ready for therapy, explore with yourself, okay, going through all of this, when else outside of this relationship have I felt this way?
Right.
Just remind me of. And journal.
Yeah.
Do voice journals if you don't want to write.
Yeah.
Right? But do something about it, process it, because it's gonna create awareness for you. And it's gonna be really helpful for you and your partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up with awareness. I think that's like super key. Like I love talking to you because like the issues that I was bringing up even in our session was like from even years prior to that. I was like in my mid-20s and now we're like a decade later. So it's really cool to kind of have this powwow because that awareness was so key with me in terms of intimate relationships, like my relationships that I had where like I didn't know what my attachment style was. Like I just thought everyone was out to get me. I just thought everyone didn't really care about me. I thought everyone, yeah. It's like these narratives were consuming me in these emotional states. So that made me push people away or made me run away or try to destroy the relationship without really trying to kind of have those conversations. So like realizing where my own internal disorganized attachment comes from, but knowing that I'm an avoidant in moments of tension where I shut down or my brain literally doesn't work, where like I need to go for a walk and I'll realize that I need to go away for my brain to calm down so I can start thinking clearly again, or I need a couple days where I'll realize like, wait, I didn't bring anything up. I didn't bring up these questions that I should have. I don't feel resolved yet. And the wrong partner, without me realizing that, it's easy for me to be like, well, this guy always got problems. He's always bringing stuff up and he can never move on or he needs to win the argument. But with me verbalizing, hey, this is what it looks like on me. My brain shuts down, so I'm not productive, but I want to let you in on that in real time to know that it's not you. I'm not trying to be, because she may be, I have an anxious attachment where I'm like, well, this guy doesn't love me, doesn't care. Like, no, I love you. I care. I just need to go for a walk or my brain's shutting down right now. And also in 48 hours, I may bring some stuff up and it's not to keep arguing. It's just my brain's finally caught up with itself and it feels safe. So like, but I didn't know any of that. So I was not fun to argue with whatsoever. I mean, and the avoidancy would just overcome all of it. And it was unfair to my partner because all these things were sometimes not even had nothing to do with her. It was just what was internally me. So I love that you said that self-awareness because that self-awareness has helped me out a lot. And I still see like to this day, I'm like, I'm able to like kind of take a step back and even see myself do it where I'm like, oh my God, it's like happening right now. And I think there's a level of grace with that too. It's like, it's easy to beat yourself up because you're not perfect at handling things. But that awareness is a beautiful first step to give yourself that grace, which is really cool.
What happens a lot is that we learn to be so focused on everything outside of us
Yeah.
that we often don't learn to also look within.
Uh-huh.
And when we start building that awareness, we start realizing how much we were missing,
Yeah.
how much we weren't catching that was going on while all this was happening outside of us. And we weren't really even aware that there was this in all, this process all of its own happening within ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the key is bringing it within, bringing the attention within to really get to know what's my process like. Because one of the things that I wanted to say, and not to mention mirrors again, it feels like I'm gonna about to, make it talk about mirrors. But
Yeah.
one of the things that a lot of the time we don't realize is that our partner, the reason why conflict comes up or the reason why triggers come up, usually it's because we have a partner that is serving as a mirror for us to finally do the healing that's necessary. But what we get told by, the movies, if
Yeah.
it doesn't look magical, if it doesn't look a certain way, if you're getting triggered left and right, then that's not the right person for you.
Yeah.
When reality, and I'm not saying that you should be getting triggered left and right. I'm
Right.
also not to normalize, toxic relationships.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that getting triggered by a partner, especially when it's a partner that is willing to join you in the process of doing the work, a partner that's able to be supportive, even when they don't know how to be supportive, they're making an attempt to be supportive.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, that's just your partner serving as a mirror so that you can finally heal the things that need to be healed,
Wow.
that weren't safe to heal before.
Yeah.
So there's only so much healing that we can do on our own.
Yeah.
Then in relationship, we get to do the rest of it.
Wow. And that's a new frontier of fear right there. Is just like, because like I'm in this era of singlehood. Everyone's always asking, Eli, you available, whatever. I'm on TikTok. There's a lot of ladies on there, what I'm saying. And I'm like, yo, I'm unavailable. I'm waitlisted. I'm out of stock. Put me on layaway, if anything. The solitude is what's serving me right now. But I do know that I have to put this into practice at a certain point. Like there's a lot of things I'm like realizing and understanding in myself and giving my grace for, but I need to put myself in that moment with another individual. And it's beautiful to be in this era where I'm at now, where I thought every ex was out to get me and she just wasn't the one. In a certain capacity, she wasn't. But also I realize there's a lot of traits that I'm bringing into every single relationship. So even if there is this person that is really there for me, I'm still going to come with this level of, well, you're out to get me, run away, whatever. And I'm never going to succeed. But that's the things that I need to work on. And if anything, this person could be a love that I always needed versus the love that I'm conditioned or used to. That's why I always say, like, healthy love is challenging as, you know what I mean? Like everyone's thinking, oh, I'm going to find a great emotionally available man and there's going to be no issues whatsoever. And it's going to be great and no problem. Like, no. But I rather have this challenging love of, wow, is this a mirror? Is this a reflection? Let's dive into that versus he cheated on my cousin. And this is like the second time I did it, but I'm going to take him back because I love him. And, yeah, he doesn't have a job and a car, but, it's fine. I rather deal with this challenging than that toxicity any day of the week. But yeah, I think it's really key to kind of be in that position. And that's where the work is. That's really scary. Like, because that's the new frontier of vulnerability because it's easy to look at TikTok. It's easy to, like, even therapy, like this is everywhere online, where that could get really skewed where, well, how I feel matters and it's valid. And this person is not my person. So let me just get out of it. Or maybe this isn't worth fighting for. Maybe we shouldn't even do the work. And you hit it on the fact of toxicity in relationships. I'm like, I know as a therapist, it must be hard to navigate with people if they wanted to make it work, but it's just toxic as hell. So like, I'm curious, might not even be an answer, but I'm like, how do you know when it's time to go or to walk away? And like the best way you could verbalize that or answer that. I mean, I know it's pretty complex, but I know there's a lot of people that are seething it. Like, okay, all this is great, but should I be with him or should I break up with him? Impossible question a lot of times, but I'm curious what your take on
Yeah.
that.
And it is on a case by case basis.
Yeah.
I think that if you're finding yourself, if you're really wanting to work through it and both of you really want to work through it, but it feels like you get stuck every other second, I think sometimes, and I have, encouraged people in the past, maybe this is something that you get to work through on your own first.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have to. And I know some people are like, oh, like, well, if we break up, then, that's it. Like, I'm not going to go back. And it's like, no, sometimes it's healthy to take a break so that you can go and do some healing for yourself and then see where you're at and see whether or not you're even wanting to come back and reconvene and see if you're able to keep moving forward with this person.
Yeah.
Right. I think the biggest and most telling sign is when you feel like you're getting stuck every second or every other second. Right. It's like we're trying to work on something and we can't even talk about this because now we already have a line of other issues that are presenting themselves because we're trying to talk about this one thing.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
And I do get to work with couples like that, will sit in therapy and they'll get to experience that even within the context of therapy. And then it becomes a conversation of, you know, can we do some sessions where it's just one-on-one? So I'll split them up so that they can get to experience,
Yeah.
what it's like to do the work on their own. Sometimes that's the solution.
Yeah.
And then back together. Sometimes even that's not enough.
Yeah.
But in therapy, that can be something that you explore, whether or not the relationship is at a point where it's too toxic to do some of the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's always like the hard thing that trips people up. And I appreciate you verbalizing that because there's so much of like, well, it could be this, like this potential of this guy, the potential of what he could be, the potential. And when is it that moment when to move on and to let go? And I think it's beautiful that you guys are diving into these actions. But if anything, that could be an exploration of very much realizing we're on two different life paths and this might not be it. But again, that is a resource to help you get there. And that honesty and that upfrontness is going to help you discover that as well. So if anything, that's an extra push on that radical honesty for people that are like, I still don't know. Like if you really want to get to the point of like, is this my person? How do I step into that most authentic? Verbalize that and see if this is something they could pick up or at least try to, or at least put in some effort in to really see if this is something we could do. And you have the amazing people like Maritza that's going to help you navigate all that, which is phenomenal. No, I appreciate you answering that. I just want to say that just thank you, and I've thanked you throughout the years, and I was really excited to interview you. I was really excited to chat with you. You've always been on. You were always like planned. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna wait for this because like a lot of people found me on TikTok. That's where majority of people listen to me, and it's like, yeah, I used to be extremely insecure. I would seek external validation with women because I didn't love myself. Like women have always been like this thing of like approval or what have you. Like they're always wondering like, oh my God, we're like, oh no, I went to therapy and I do all this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, how did this former fuckboy get here? And you were such a pivotal person to help me get to this space. And I've had multiple therapists after, and I will say, you're still my fave. You're still the Yoda. You're still the Yoda master. So I feel so lucky to find you in the moment that I did. And I'll forever like know you as my Jedi Master Yoda that could see, why are you running away from me? All these damn mirrors and whatnot. But yes, I appreciate you helping me on my life path. I appreciate that other people get to discover you and the value that you give because you're badass at what you do. And it did not go in vain because I'm having conversations with myself that I couldn't even fathom when we met. And the work is still continues. Like I'm able to even openly say, I want a wife at some point, which was never the case. Like she met me when I was like in these streets. I was like, hell, I'm a bachelor. I'm working my career and all that. I'm visualizing my personal life, and it took a lot of work to get there. So, thank you for helping me get to that visualization. It was really key.
And thank you for coming up with that idea and actually following through. I will say that as I'm sitting here earlier, I was realizing I think this is part of the reason that episode of Better Like was actually a very influential episode for my father to go to therapy.
What? Really?
My father is currently 71, Mexican man who knew he had a therapist daughter and would say, oh, therapy. And my father has been in therapy since 2021, I want to say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's fantastic. That's so beautiful to hear. I had no idea that was even the case. I'm so glad that video made such an impact. And that's the beauty of it too, is like, it's for the Latino community, BIPOC people in general. It can be very scary. And it shows that it could be a resource no matter what stage of life that you're in. So people that are listening, you have some parents that are like, maybe that's entirely possible. It's beautiful to hear. Thank you for sharing that. That's so cool. So with that said, Maritza, how can we follow you? How can we support you? How can we learn more?
I'm on Instagram. On Instagram, I tend to post, I go through periods of just posting vulnerable personal stuff.
We love that. We love the power of vulnerability. Fantastic.
Now, I do like to post from time to time. I go on streaks of posting, tips and helpful stuff for
Yeah.
people working on their relationships. So, you're welcome to follow me there. Um, I'm open to be a speaker if, people want more of this. It's something that I'm trying to kind of take on more because I know that with all the years that I've been a therapist, I feel like there's a lot that I want to share. And yes, I love working with people in therapy one-on-one with couples. And I'm like, I want to share all of this. I want to reach more people.
Yeah.
If you know of any opportunities, send them my way. I want to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in the process of writing a book. So at some point that'll be something that I'll be putting out there. But yeah, I want to share because it's not just me coming at you with information, that I've learned through my clinical practice, but it's actually through my life experience because
Yeah.
that I use with people, I've used it for myself. I've tried it myself first.
Yeah. Love it. Like, yeah, you keep it real, tell like it is, you let the people in, and that's such a powerful tool. And also show that like this is how we connect with people. Like, not because they're perfect and have it all together, that there's these imperfections and vulnerabilities, yet we find a way to move forward. And that is where you could really lean on someone. But so yeah, follow her, please. If you have any events, have this woman on stage. It'll be fantastic. But either way, Maritza, thank you so much for being here. You're fantastic. Your energy is gorgeous. And thank you for being part of this. It means a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed Maritza. I hope you guys enjoyed the value that she gave. I love that we got to talk about couples. Oh my God, it's necessary. And I'll find some more couples moments because we talk about love and dating and early stages. Does he like me? But what about when we're in the relationship? So I think it was really impactful. And it was so beautiful to connect with her because it was like seeing a teacher again. It was like seeing a mentor again. And there's so many things that we've done even in the sessions that we had that I still bring to the table with my clients, what I do today. So I'm love that you guys got to meet her. I hope you got some value out of it. And thank you for listening and being awesome. And if you want to learn more about Maritza, or if you want to work with me and my coaching post-breakup boot camp, link in the bio for that. And I'll see you next week.
The Self Hype Podcast.